Live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another segment of the Just Bernard Show here on all of my social streaming platforms as well as my website. Anyway, gosh, it's been 2 weeks. I'm kind of feeling out of the flow here, so give me a second as I ground and regroup for you guys. Anyway, so I just wanted to say hello to everybody. I know it's been a couple of weeks. Like I said, I decided to take a week off last week. It was such a really good, busy week, busy month in January. And I thought I could use a little bit of rest. So I want to give it just a few minutes, a few moments to let some of you log on and see your notification that this show is live now. Today we are going to be discussing what witches believe, but before that I want to say hello to Noctor, who's on YouTube. Hello there, good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. And I want to double check. I redid all of my settings, so I think I should double check and make sure everything is connected correctly. Oh, well, I guess we are connected. Hello Carlos on Facebook, and hello Alicia on Facebook. Good to see you all. And so, anyway, let me tell you a little bit about why I chose this particular topic this week. I believe it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, I had posted a funny meme. It's funny, a lot of my memes are my inspiration for these shows that we do, but it was in reference to Christian witchcraft. And actually, in some of the pagan and witchcraft groups that I belong to, some people were asking, can you be a Christian and be a witch, and et cetera, et cetera. So, not only that, there's so much like satanic panic out there that I thought this would be a really good topic to help educate some of you, maybe kind of inspire those of you that are practitioners to look a little bit more deeper into the history of witchcraft, and just, give some clarity and share to those of you who are just curious as to what it is that we actually believe. So let me say that I got to do the disclaimer because I know a lot of you are practitioners and you have your own traditions, and I respect all of the traditions out there that fall under the umbrella of witchcraft. So I'm only going to be sharing my particular experience, my particular knowledge base of what I've studied and what it is that I personally believe. So this is not to say that everyone believes this way. It's not to say that all witches believe this. I believe that there's a lot of gray area when it comes to witchcraft and people who call themselves witches. So why don't we start off with that real quick? For me, I label myself a witch. I've always been interested in witchcraft and wizardry and magic and all of the mystical arts and the occult arts, literally most of my life, if not all of my life, as far back as I can remember. And as I got into my late teens, I did discover Scott Cunningham and read some of his books on Wicca and witchcraft. And I was like, you know what? But more on that later. Let's talk about where this idea of this modern notion that we have of witchcraft, okay? Because there's a lot of history, and I'm not going to go into a full-fledged lesson on the history of witchcraft. However, I'll kind of simplify it, and forgive me if I'm not going to go into too much detail. This is just to give some clarifications. It is, in my humble opinion, that everything going back through history, throughout the millennia, the 2 millennia, 3 millennia, whatever it may be, back to the Babylonian, the Egyptian, and whatnot, that all, if most, if not all, indigenous spiritual cultures or indigenous cultures and their practice of spirituality involved some form of witchcraft. It isn't until the Abrahamic religions came to rise that we saw this notion that, witchcraft is evil, or that it should not be, practiced or whatnot, and that separation between the mystical and the individual practitioner it began to separate during that time. We see that whether it be the indigenous cultures of South America, North America, Australia, Polynesia, Siberia, all of these indigenous cultures, including Northern European, pre-Christian Northern European cultures, believed in basically the same ideas of the mystical and the unseen that modern witches believe in. And it's fair to say that modern witchcraft borrows heavily and is a reconstructionist religion, spiritual practice of these old pre-Christian belief systems. Now, me personally, I do draw a lot of my my practice from North American, South American indigenous, as well as Northern European, and some of the late 19th century occult practices. And we're going to get into that a little bit too in 20 minutes. Let's see how much I can cover. Anyway, so to simplify, witchcraft basically has its roots in all indigenous spirituality around the world. So what we have in history is we have this uprising, or this uptick. I shouldn't say uprising. This uptick of Christianity beginning to spread, and Judaism, Christianity, and Islam beginning to spread around the world. And those became the dominant religions. And I do say dominant as they beat people into submission and murdered many, many, many indigenous practitioners around the world to convert to these belief systems. I don't know so much about Judaism, but God knows the Church, Catholic Church, as well as Islam, has a history of forcing people into their religion throughout history. As this happened, we're looking at, let's say, the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. Slavery began to take foot and take a hold on the Western culture. And they began to import slaves over into the Caribbean, as well as North America and South America. And a lot of the slaves weren't allowed to practice their indigenous religion. So what they did was they superimposed Catholicism onto their indigenous practices, as did a lot of indigenous cultures in South America as well as North America. You'll see some cultures of the Andes that still practice their indigenous rituals, but they'll use the terms, like a saint or Jesus or the Holy Trinity, etc., etc. The terminology has been superimposed on the practice in order to appease the conquering culture. So that's where we get Santeria. That's where we get voodoo. That's where we get a lot of what we would call Christian witchcraft. And yes, this is what inspired me, is that a lot of people don't believe that you can be a Christian and practice witchcraft. I have to disagree. I do believe that voodoo, Centria are a perfect example of practicing witchcraft while still maintaining a Christian belief system, or to simplify it even further, using a Christian pantheon. It's fair to say that many modern witches will fall into, I'm not going to say fall into, lean into a particular pantheon or another. As I was exploring my own witch, wizard, pagan, shamanic path, I dabbled with Celtic, because I was very, very drawn to Northern European witchcraft and Celtic witchcraft. I'm still created my own amalgamation of the different pantheons. Just like in Catholicism, the gods and goddesses of different cultures all have different meanings. And a modern witch, most of the time, a modern witch, and again, I'm speaking for myself, me, will utilize a particular god and goddess depending on its meaning, on its energy, on its correspondences. Just like a Catholic would pray to, Saint Christopher to find something, or every saint had a particular energy or focus to it. So let's step back a little bit. Let's go back, way back to the beginning of this talk, and let's go back to the Kemetic people, the ancient Egyptians. And I like this definition because I believe it clarifies things when it comes to the beliefs and the gods and the goddesses, and why do we use this correspondence and whatnot, and especially when we're dealing with polytheism and polytheistic witchcraft and or paganism. The Kemetic people had a different way of looking at the gods and goddesses. They did not necessarily believe that, like many modern Judeo-Christian, Muslim, Islamic believers, that there was this person in the sky, that there was this being that oversaw everything. The Kemetic people, the ancient Egyptians, believed, and the modern practitioners believe, and I'm one of them, that each of the gods and goddesses were an energy, a natural force, a natural energy force. So, for example, rivers, oceans, and whatnot had a specific energy, and therefore they attributed that to a particular god or goddess. For example, my patron goddess, and I'm not going to get into the whole patron thing, but my patron goddess is Isis. Isis is known for magic. She's known for fertility, for beauty, for procreation, and things like that. So she represents that energy. That's not to say that there is this winged golden woman flying around in the ethers that controls all fertility, all magic, and all that. It is an energy given an anthropomorphic image in order for us to connect with it on a psychological or subconscious level, to align our vibration with the energy of Isis equals love, magic, beauty, etc. She represents the energy. She is not the energy. She represents the energy. You understand what I'm saying here? So the ancient Egyptians and many indigenous cultures around the world ascribed these natural forces, nothing supernatural here, natural forces, wind, Marvel is a great example, Thor, thunder. Thor represents the power of thunder, the energy of thunder. He does not control thunder, he represents the thunder. And they gave him an anthropomorphic image to represent that to us mere mortals. These So we see this in all the cultures around the world, is what I'm trying to say. We see this all around the world. For me, I grew up in Miami, as many of you know. I found out recently. I was adopted by a Cuban family and raised in Miami. I recently found out that I'm Seminole Indian and Irish. So interesting how I was drawn to that my entire life, being drawn to Native American practices and Celtic magical practices. But that's here nor there. I did grow up around Santeria. Many members of my family practice it. I saw it all around me. In my house, there was a giant picture, a giant statue of Santa Barbara, Chango, and my mother would put apples to it. There was that little stone figure, Elegua, by the door, people blowing cigar smoke on it. So I was always around this magical stuff. So I was always very interested in it. And it wasn't until later on that my family converted to Pentecostalism. A few of them did, actually quite a few of them did, and they shunned it all. And my father made my mom get rid of all the statues, and the family turned their back on any Santeria and whatnot. But my interest was piqued. I was like, that's it. I'm interested now. I want to know more. And not only that, I was having so many paranormal experiences as a small child into my teens, well, my entire life, but at that point, I had to know more. So understanding that the supernatural was merely something that is natural and innate in all of us became a very strong belief in me because, again, in my experience, it has always been a part of my life. And when I say supernatural, I mean instant manifestation, being able to see spirits, being able to foretell, the future and my dreams and whatnot, things like that, which I've spoken about in the past. But as I got older, that's when I discovered Scott Cunningham and Wicca. And I didn't know where I stood with my beliefs. I read the books you buy out of the National Enquirer, in the back of the National Enquirer. My mother used to read it. I bought the Frost Wicca book or something like that, and it didn't really resonate with me. I read every single book in the library, and that was all written from old texts that were written by monks that were trying to make witches sound evil and that they flew on brooms and ate children and things like that. And so there was nothing really that resonated with me, but I knew there was something there. And when I picked up Scott Cunningham's Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner, I think it was by the second chapter, he starts talking about the goddess and the full moon, and whoa, it all fell into place for me. The divine feminine. There is a divine masculine and a divine feminine. Yin and yang, positive, negative, black, white, up, down, contrast, polarity. All of this everything started to click for me. So I got more involved with that, and that's where my path began, really practicing my path of initiation, getting involved with different orders and different covens, and studying with shamanic practitioners and teachers and whatnot. So that's when everything got very serious for me. But I will say some of the things I've learned along the way. Some witches do believe that, Hecate is the god of the witches, and she is this real crone that flies around in the mystical wind, and she's always there to protect us and whatnot. Kind of like what you see on Sabrina, the dark, whatever the full title is, the Netflix version of Sabrina. Some people do see it as a real entity. Some people see it, like myself, see it as a representation of a natural energy. And then there are those that literally cultivate an entity into manifestation on the etheric plane. In Kabbalistic and occult practice, we call that like a golem. You're creating this thought form and giving it life. Eventually, it becomes real. A lot of times that doesn't end up so well, which I stay away from that myself now. Yeah, I did that before as as a young practitioner and learned by my mistakes. And so let me get into that about the occult. How does the occult tie in with witchcraft and whatnot? So, a lot of the stuff that we all read about, and hear about in modern occultism is either Masonry, Golden Dawn, Thelema, Satanism, some of the, what's the circus guy, Anton LaVey type stuff. And all of that draws from the basically from wealthy white people. Do some reading, you will learn that this is correct. Most of that occult stuff that we're hearing about today comes from wealthy late 19th century white people like Aleister Crowley, like the Unfortunate, like some of the others that have traveled around. They went around the world, let's say to India and to the East, and they studied, trying to find some purpose or meaning in their life, and they studied some of the occult practices of some of the British Empire countries back then in the late 19th century, and they brought it back with them, and they created these secret societies like the Golden Dawn, A.E. Waite, and all of those. They brought back wisdom from India. They brought back wisdom from Africa. They brought back wisdom from Egypt. Remember, during the late 19th century, everyone was big on Egyptian stuff. They had found Tut's tomb a little bit after that. So the wealthy British were very much enamored with everything Egyptian and everything mysterious. So these guys brought it all back to England, created the Golden Dawn, created all these other magical orders. And that's not to say that these things don't work, because they did create a very profound system. And as someone who has used some of these magical formula that they have brought back with them and formulated, I mean, they were pretty brilliant in the stuff that they created, and a lot of the teachings do resonate with me to this day. So what do they believe? Well, actually, I'll say what doesn't resonate with me. A lot of this, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, Anglo-Saxon witchcraft or Anglo occultism, has to do with, again, bringing in the Abrahamic religion into it, and Kabbalism and whatnot. Yes, they borrowed from Israel as well. But we lose a lot of the feminine. We lose a lot of the divine feminine. Yes, some of them did bring in, yin yang and some of the Eastern principles, but for me, there wasn't enough balance. So I learned it. I got my initiations. I went through as far as I wanted to go, quite honestly. And went up to I don't know what degree I was in, some teen degree. And took what worked for me and left the rest. And that's okay. And that's what I find to be the most wonderful thing about modern witchcraft and witches. Yeah, it's important to learn the basics. Yes, it's important to have a strong foundation. And yes, if you can get a real teacher or be taken into an order or into a coven that actually teaches, that's wonderful. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can develop a strong foundation through studying, through the Gray School of Wizardry, which I am an instructor at. It's an online school. Go check it out. Little plug for them. We can learn in many, many ways these days. But I will say that while you're learning, it's important to apply the principles. Once you've mastered what you've been taught, then you can begin to pick and choose. Kind of like, going to cooking school. You're not going to whip an egg with a knife. Your teacher's going to say use a fork to whip an egg to create a scrambled egg. When you get, once you pass your culinary, I like cooking. Once you pass the culinary exam or whatnot, if you want to use a chopstick, that's fine. But if your teacher says use a fork, you use a fork. But going back to the whole eclecticism of it, it's individual, which is what I believe may not be what another viewer believes, or what someone in South Florida believes, or in California, or in Mexico, or in Ireland, or in Israel, or in China, where there are practitioners all over the world. And one of the things I do love about it is that it is a very individual path, because we believe that our relationship with the divine, with the mystical, with the unseen, is between us and the unseen, the divine. There is no intermediary. We are a part of nature. We acknowledge life in all things, and the wind, the trees, and life. We see it as a conscious stream, a consciousness stream of consciousness, and we acknowledge that. So I don't need to go to, I don't need to go to a priest to confess. I don't need to go to a church or a temple or any particular building in order to practice. It's between me and my divine source, whatever you might think that is. It's great to be a part of a group. I love working with covens and orders, and I have a small grove. We're kind of a little loose these days with the pandemic, but I have my own grove that I practice with, and we had an out of court for a little while. We can't do that right now because of the pandemic. But actually, you're my out of court. These shows, my people here that I love so much, you're a part of my extended magical family as far as I'm concerned. So and I'm going to end with one thing, because I have to wrap this up. But let me talk about magic real quick. And again, these are just like quick tidbits and FYIs, FAQ type things. I believe that every form of spirituality believes in some form of magic or other, whether it be the transubstantiation within the Catholic ritual, whether it be prayer, whether it be fasting. To me, these are all magical practices. Anything that alters your state of consciousness to become closer to divine, to align with divine energy, no matter your image of the divine, no matter what your belief of the divine is, to me is a form of magic. It's natural for us to want to connect with something greater than ourselves. And any practice that deals with that is a form of magic. So I believe, and I know the word has a bad connotation, but I believe we're all witches in our own way. In one form or another, we're all basically witches. I'll leave it at this. I'll end with this, actually, because I do got to go. The word witch is it's an ancient word. Not an ancient word. What's the word I'm looking for? I believe it's an Anglo word. I'll just say Northern European. I'm trying not to screw up my terminology here. Comes from the word wicce, Wicce. Wicca is actually the masculine form of it. And Wicce, Wicce, is the feminine form. And they basically just mean wise one. It's the path of the wise. That's all it is. It's propaganda that has made the word witch a bad word. It's the Wizard of Oz that made the witch look bad. It's the Malleus Maleficarum that made the witches look bad. It's the Catholic Church that made the witches look bad. It's the misinterpretation of biblical quotes that have made the witch look bad. And we have a visitor. Hello. She came to say goodbye. So the word witch itself just means wise person. It's nothing there. So if you're a wise person, you practice the search for wisdom and rituals to enhance your wisdom, you're basically a witch. And I mean that with love and no disrespect to anyone's path. Like I said, it's not a bad word to me at all. Anyway, so I want to let you all know that next week, I will be back next week. We got a slew of shows scheduled for the next several months, actually. But I have a wonderful guest coming on from Llewellyn, an author from Llewellyn, and her name is Dr. Alexander Sharon. I hope I'm saying that right. You might have read some of her books. She does some really good stuff. This is She's going to be talking about reclaiming and rebuilding your life after trauma and grief and how we can move past it. We're all going through some grief right now. We're all kind of being traumatized a little bit here and there. The world's a little bit wacky, and I thought it would be great to have her come on. She's very well educated, as well as a very, very wise woman, if you know what I mean. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Let me say hello and goodbye to a few of you here. Yes, hello, Raymond. How are you on Facebook? Hi, Angelfish on YouTube. Hi, Sherry on YouTube. Oh, Shelly, hi. And I see Linda's name. I wonder if Linda's there. If you are, say hello. Hi, Becky Duncan on YouTube. And, well, there's so many of you, I'm not going to be able to say hello to everybody. But anyway, thank you for watching. Please remember, if you like my show and you like the work that I do online, please consider becoming a supporter, either on Patreon, on Facebook, or on YouTube. As well, you are welcome to make a donation on my website and at any time. I love you guys so very much. Thank you so much for watching and being a part of my extended global family. I love you very much. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Tuesday as we cover another very interesting topic. I love you. Bye-bye.